The set was quiet, too quiet for a film production. Usually there's noise, direction being shouted, cameras being adjusted, crew members talking, actors running lines, the constant hum of a movie being made. But on the set of Unforgiven in August of 1991, there was silence. Clint Eastwood sat in a canvas chair under the Montana sun, his hat pulled low, his face unreadable. He'd been sitting there for 20 minutes, hadn't said a word, hadn't moved except to occasionally shift his weight or take a sip of water. The crew waited. They'd learned to wait. Because for 3 days now, Clint Eastwood, the director and star of this Western, the man responsible for every decision on this set, had stopped speaking. Not to the actors. Not to the cinematographer. Not to the producers who'd flown in from Los Angeles expecting updates. Not to anyone. He just sat and watched and waited for something only he could see. It started on day 12 of the shoot. They were filming a scene in the town of Big Whiskey. Gene Hackman, playing the brutal sheriff Little Bill Daggett, was supposed to beat Richard Harris's character in front of a crowd. It was a pivotal scene. Violent. Ugly. The kind of moment that would define the film's tone. They'd rehearsed it. Blocked it out. The stunt coordinator had worked with both actors to make sure the violence looked real, but stayed safe. Everything was ready. Eastwood called action. The scene began. Hackman delivered his lines. Harris took the beating. The extras reacted. The cameras rolled. Cut. The crew waited for Eastwood's response, for notes, for adjustments, for the usual back and forth of filmmaking. Eastwood said nothing. He just sat there watching the playback monitor. His face gave away nothing. The cinematographer, Jack Green, approached carefully. "That felt good, Clint. Want to go again or move on?" Eastwood didn't respond. Just kept watching the monitor. Green waited. 30 seconds. A minute. Finally, he tried again. "Clint?" Eastwood held up one hand, not aggressively, just a small gesture that meant wait. Or stop. Or I'm thinking. Green backed away. The crew stood around, uncertain. This wasn't unusual for Eastwood exactly. He was known for being economical with words, for trusting his instincts, for not over-explaining. But this was different. This was complete silence. They waited. 5 minutes. 10. Finally, Eastwood stood up and walked away from the set. Didn't say where he was going. Just left. The assistant director, a woman named Sarah, who'd worked with Eastwood before, made the call. "All right, everyone, let's break for lunch. Back in 90 minutes. During lunch, the producers cornered Sarah. "What's going on? Is he okay? Does he want to reshoot the scene? Do we need to adjust the schedule?" Sarah didn't know. He does this sometimes. Goes quiet. Works things out in his head. Give him space. But lunch ended and Eastwood didn't come back. He was in his trailer. The door was closed. No one wanted to knock. Eventually, as the afternoon sun started to shift, he emerged. Walked back to the set. Looked at the crew assembled and waiting. And still said nothing. He gestured. Pointed to the cameras. Pointed to the actors. Pointed to the positions where they'd been before. The crew understood. Set it up again. Same scene. Same blocking. They filmed it again. Eastwood watched. Cut. No notes. No feedback, just that same silent intensity. They did it 7 more times that day. 7 takes of the same scene. Each time Eastwood would watch, think, and then quietly signal to go again. The actors started to get frustrated. Hackman, a consummate professional, tried to engage. "Clint, talk to me. What are you looking for? What's not working?" Eastwood looked at him. Really looked at him, then shook his head slightly. Not a no. Just not yet. By the end of day 12, they'd shot the scene 9 times, and Eastwood hadn't spoken a single word. Day 13 was worse. Or better, depending on who you asked. Eastwood arrived on set before dawn. He walked through the town they'd built, the saloon, the jail, the main street, and he just looked, touched the buildings, felt the wood, stood in different positions and studied the light. The crew arrived and found him sitting on the porch of the sheriff's office, completely still, watching the sun come up. They set up for the day's scenes. A confrontation between Eastwood's character, William Money, and a group of cowboys. Dialogue heavy, emotionally complex. The kind of scene that required collaboration, discussion, rehearsal. Eastwood gathered the actors with a gesture. They stood in a circle, waiting for direction, for context, for his vision of how the scene should play. He acted it out instead, moved through the blocking without words, showed them with his body, his positioning, his stillness. Exactly what he wanted. The other actors watched, fascinated and confused in equal measure. Morgan Freeman, playing Ned Logan, Money's old partner, had worked with Eastwood before. He understood the language. "You want more hesitation here," he said, pointing to a moment in the scene. "More weight." Eastwood nodded. Once. Definitive. They filmed. Eastwood watched. They went again, and again, and again. No words. Just silence. Just this strange, intense focus that filled the entire set. The producers were panicking. By day 14, they'd called the studio. "We don't know what's happening. He's not communicating. The schedule is starting to slip. We might need to intervene." The studio executive who took the call had worked with Eastwood for 20 years. "Is he shooting?" "Yes." "Is the footage good?" "We think so. We can't tell. He won't talk about it." "Then leave him alone. Clint knows what he's doing." But doubt was spreading through the crew. Whispers in corners. Theories about what was wrong. Some thought Eastwood was having some kind of breakdown. Others thought he was unhappy with the script, with the actors, with something fundamental about the film. A few thought maybe he'd decided the whole project was a mistake and didn't know how to say it. Sarah, the ad, watched it all and said nothing. Because she'd seen something the others hadn't. She'd seen Eastwood watching playback late at night when everyone else had gone home. She'd seen him sitting alone in the empty town set, just absorbing it. And she'd seen his eyes. They weren't uncertain. They weren't lost. They were searching, hunting for something specific, something he'd know when he found it. On day 15, they were shooting in the saloon, a scene where Money returns to violence after years of trying to be a better man. It's the emotional core of the film, the moment where all his attempts at redemption collapse, and the killer he'd tried to bury comes back. The saloon was dressed. Dark. Atmospheric. The other actors were in position. Eastwood stood at the entrance, hat pulled low, silhouetted against the light from outside. He stood there for 2 full minutes, not moving. The crew barely breathed. Then he walked in, slowly, each step deliberate. His face was different, harder. The change was subtle but complete. He wasn't Clint Eastwood anymore. He was William, a man about to do terrible things because terrible things had been done. The scene played out. No one called action. They just knew to start. The cameras rolled. The other actors responded to Eastwood's presence, his energy, his complete transformation into this haunted, deadly character. When it ended, the set was silent for a different reason. Not confusion. Awe. Eastwood walked back to his chair, sat down, and for the first time in 3 days he spoke. "That's it," he said quietly. "That's what I was looking for." The crew exhaled collectively. Someone started to applaud but stopped. When Eastwood held up a hand. "We're not celebrating yet," he said. His voice was rough from disuse. We've got a film to finish. Let's keep moving. That was it. No explanation, no apology, no discussion of the 3 days of silence, just back to work. But something had changed. The actors understood now. Eastwood hadn't been struggling. He'd been waiting for the film to tell him what it needed to be, waiting to fully inhabit this character he'd spent years thinking about, waiting for that moment when everything aligned, the location, the light, the energy, the emotional truth. He'd been listening to something deeper than words, to the story itself. Morgan Freeman said later, in an interview years after the film came out, that those 3 days changed how he thought about acting. Most directors talk too much, Freeman said. They explain and discuss and workshop everything to death. Clint did the opposite. He went silent. And in that silence, we had to find the truth ourselves. We couldn't rely on him to tell us. We had to feel it. And when we finally got it right, we knew. Because he knew. Gene Hackman had a different take. It was maddening, he admitted. I'm used to collaboration, discussion. But Clint was right. If he'd talked us through it, if he'd explained what he wanted, we would have given him something intellectual, something performed. The silence forced us to go deeper, to stop thinking and start being. The rest of the shoot moved differently after that. Eastwood spoke, but sparingly. He trusted his actors, trusted his crew, trusted that if he created the right environment and stayed true to his vision, the film would emerge. He shot efficiently, most scenes in 1 or 2 takes. He didn't watch dailies obsessively, didn't second-guess himself. He'd found what he was looking for in those 3 days of silence, and now he just had to capture it. Unforgiven wrapped on schedule, under budget. The producers were relieved. The studio was cautiously optimistic. Westerns weren't popular in 1991. The genre felt dead. But Eastwood had delivered something powerful. They could feel it. The film came out in August of 1992. The reviews were extraordinary. Critics called it a masterpiece. A deconstruction of the Western myth. A meditation on violence and redemption, and the cost of both. Eastwood's performance was praised as career best. Hackman's was called ferocious and heartbreaking. Freeman's quiet dignity anchored the entire film. It became a hit, not just critically, but commercially. Audiences who'd grown up on Eastwood's earlier westerns, The Man with No Name, Dirty Harry, saw something different here. Something darker and more honest. A reckoning with all the violence he'd glamorized before. Award season came. Unforgiven swept everything. Golden Globes, SAG Awards, the Oscars, 4 Academy Awards, Best Picture, Best Director for Eastwood, Best Supporting Actor for Hackman, Best Film Editing. Eastwood stood on stage accepting the Best Director award. He was 62 years old. He'd been making movies for 40 years. And this was the first time the Academy had recognized him. His speech was brief. Classic Eastwood. He thanked his crew, his actors, his family. He talked about the Western genre and what it meant to him. He didn't mention the 3 days of silence, didn't talk about his process, didn't explain how he'd made the film. But backstage, a reporter asked him about it. About the rumors that had circulated during production. About the silence. Eastwood smiled. Just slightly. Sometimes you have to stop talking to hear what the film is trying to tell you, he said. Everyone wants to discuss and analyze and plan everything out. But some things you can't plan. Some things you just have to feel. And you can't feel anything if you're too busy talking. Was it difficult? Going silent for that long? Eastwood thought about it. No. The difficult part was trusting it, trusting that the silence would lead somewhere, that I wasn't just being stubborn or foolish, but I knew there was something in this story, something true and important, and I wasn't going to settle for less than finding it. Did you find it? Yeah, Eastwood said. I think we did. The film endured. It's considered one of the greatest westerns ever made. Film schools teach it. Critics reference it. Directors cite it as an influence. It changed how people thought about the genre, about violence in movies, about redemption, and whether it's even possible for people who've done terrible things. And it exists because Clint Eastwood went silent for 3 days. Because he trusted his instincts over conventional wisdom. Because he refused to rush or compromise or settle for good enough. Because he understood that sometimes the most important communication happens in silence. The crew members who were there still talk about it, some with frustration at the memory of that uncertainty. Others with admiration for Eastwood's commitment to his vision. But all of them agree on one thing. Those 3 days weren't a breakdown. They weren't a mistake. They were essential. They were Eastwood stripping away everything unnecessary, including his own voice, to find the truth of the story. In a business built on talk, on pitches and notes and discussions and compromises, Eastwood chose silence. And in that silence, he made something that spoke louder than any of his previous 40 years of work. 4 Oscars. Generations of influence. A film that will be watched and studied long after everyone involved is gone. All because a 61-year-old director sat in a canvas chair under the Montana sun and refused to speak until he found what he was looking for. He wasn't being difficult. He wasn't being eccentric. He was being honest. With himself. With his art. With the story he was trying to tell. And sometimes, honesty requires silence, requires patience, requires the courage to wait for something you can't explain or schedule or plan. You just have to trust that it's there. And keep searching until you find it. The film won 4 Oscars. But Eastwood won something more valuable those 3 days on set. He won the certainty that he'd made exactly the film he needed to make. Not the film everyone wanted. Not the film that was safe or commercial or easy. The film that was true. And you can't talk your way to truth. You have to be quiet enough to hear it when it arrives. 3 days of silence. 4 Oscars. 1 perfect film. The math doesn't make sense until you understand that art doesn't come from talking. It comes from listening.